Chess fans, in today's video I'm going to show you an illustrative example of how you win by controlling the center. Often we hear people say that you should control the center, but why exactly should we do this? And second of all, how do we win because we do this? So the game starts off with e4, c5, knight f3, d6, c3. I look to place a pawn in the center and my opponent attacks my pawn with knight f6. And the idea behind this opening really is that you can't really take this pawn because of this fork. And so the pawn is actually indirectly defended. So I play bishop e2, and the same idea applies here. If he takes here, we play queen a4, and the knight is simply forked. So instead, my opponent decides to go with knight c6, another very good move. And so here, I play d4. And so this is another devious idea. If my opponent now decides to take, then I have d5, he moves his knight, and then I have the fork. And so this idea often occurs. So he takes, and I takes. And again, if he takes here, he gets met by this. So my opponent instead decides to play e3, e6. So now he could have tried to take here, and after, sorry, not take here. Yeah, actually take here, and after d5, play queen a5. And after something like knight c3, he can't take here immediately, because after queen takes, we have bishop d2 winning a piece. And so he has to play something like knight e5, in which case we can take here, and after takes, queen, bishop d2 and takes here. White is down a lot of pawns. I think he's down around 2 or 3. So yeah, he's down 2. But in compensation for being down all those pawns, white is going to castle, and black's pieces are not going to castle for a long time, and his pieces are very misplaced. So this position is actually slightly better for white. So instead, my opponent decides to play e6. And now we can see that I'm going to get a very big center. So as we can see here, white has a very large center, and all I'm doing is I'm just making sure I've developed. So I put my bishop on e2, my knights are defending my center, and what's going to come from this position is simply my opponent is going to have less space, therefore he's going to have less active pieces, and so he won't be able to make as many threats as I can. So he castles, and I play bishop e3. And the idea of bishop e3 is just to defend my center and develop, but also in some positions I want to play d5, and this a7 pawn might be under attack. So here he plays bishop d7, and as we can see already, his bishop is not doing anything at all. And so here I play rook c1, activating another rook. In some positions, I might have the idea of d5 and then knight b5 landing on here. But as you can see, the position is just really natural and free-flowing for me, so I don't really have to worry about a lot of things here. And here my opponent already makes a mistake because of how cramped his position is. He plays rook c8, which allows me the nice tactic, which I've already told you guys about, to unleash the bishop on the a7 pawn. So currently the knight's defending it, so how do I both open up this bishop and get rid of this knight? So the move is d5, attacking the knight and also opening up the bishop. And so my opponent moves his knight away. He probably doesn't want to capture because his pieces are going to be really stuck here, and my rook might be able to open up the file. So he plays knight a5, and here I just snatch up a pawn. So we can already see that from this opening that my opponent has much less space, he had to blunder a pawn because of how desperate his position was. And here my opponent makes another mistake. So often, as you can see in the game between Fischer and Spassky, the famous pawn sacrifice game, the bishop gets trapped here if he does grab a pawn. But that's only if there's a pawn here to block it. After b6, I challenge you to find the only winning move that wins here. Most of the other moves actually lose on the spot, but I'd seen this beforehand. I took the pawn. So the move, if you haven't found it yet, is queen d4. We need to attack this pawn, and as you can see, the rook can't defend because we take. The rook can't defend here because we take. And there's no other way to defend the pawn, so the pawn is simply falling. So my opponent plays rook c5, and so rook c5 is another mistake because I have b4, just a simple fork of the two pieces. And my opponent plays queen c7. And so already from here, we've seen that the central advantage has not only got us a pawn, but also put a ton of pressure on our opponent and made our pieces much more active than our opponent. So here I took his rook, he took his rook back because the bishop can be captured at any time. I took on c5 because the bishop's going to be lost. He took on c5, and I play queen d2. And here I'm just simply up an exchange, and also I control more of the center. So now the funny part about this game, and maybe it's why I shouldn't have shown it to you, is because I actually managed to draw this game because I blundered severely at the end. I was winning the entire game, but I guess we must show what goes on. So my opponent plays knight b7. I play bishop b5, rook d8, takes. When you're up in material, you should just takes. The main point of this lesson has already been gone over, but I'm just going to show you the rest of the game because it is very funny how I mess this up. So knight c6, I plan to trade some pieces. Note he can't really take here because after takes here and takes here, I have takes here making a queen. So he plays bishop d6, and I take the rook. And so here he just goes out for an all-out attack because his position is really dire. He gets that fork. I take here because, notice, if he trades here, then I take his queen, and after he takes here, I'm up on rook. And so he has to take here, and I've just grabbed the pawn because my knight was lost. I play bishop d3, he plays queen e5, threatening this in some positions. I play rook c2, getting my rook out of harm's way. He plays knight d6, activating the knight. And I play rook e2. This is an inaccuracy. I should just play g3, king g2, and then rook h1, but obviously you can't play perfect. Rook e2, knight b5. This is a nice tactic. If I move my queen, then I lose here. And if I move my knight, I think he has like knight takes e4. I'm actually going to turn on the engine for this one because I'm not sure why I don't take with my knight. I remember I saw in the game why I shouldn't take with the knight. Queen h5. Oh yeah, queen h3, and then the rook hangs here on e2. But this is still winning for me. So after king g1, something like takes on b5. I have e5 and then the fork here on e6. I didn't see any of this, but instead I just moved my knight back, and he got into d4, which is not ideal. And so now I saw the plan of playing g3, so I played g3, and my idea was to go king g2 in here. He takes on c2, queen takes c2, ex d4, and here I blunder the game into a draw. So all you have to do here is play knight takes c4, threatening the bishop, and if he takes, obviously, this can't really be good for him because, I mean, he's down in exchange. And if he, let's say, takes on e4, then I just have takes here. So that's all you really had to do. But instead, I blundered this with takes. And I want to give you a few seconds to see if you can find the draw for black. So what I calculated in the game, and maybe some of you also miscalculated like me, was that he should play queen takes f4. And this is what I thought. This move is actually losing for him. And I thought after like queen d3, check here, knight g4, and queen g3, I was just completely winning, but I completely miss queen h5, just giving up perpetual, and after just a bunch of checks, the game ended in a draw. But that was not really the point of the video. Instead, the point was to point out how you win with the center. So as we can see from the opening, I actually managed to control the center and get a very good position. And so the only things you need to know about this is that when you're controlling the center, often you should make pawn breaks in the center. And often you should just develop your pieces like natural. And the fact that you have more space is going to win you the game. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.